The room felt colder than it really was. The kind of cold that comes from silence, not weather. Chairs were lined up neatly, and the piano stood at the front like it was waiting for something important to happen. A few instructors sat together, papers in their hands, whispering quietly. Their faces showed the same thought again and again. They were expecting this to go badly. She stood near the door, holding her hands together, trying to keep them from shaking. She was smaller than most people in the room, not just in size but in presence. She did not walk in with confidence. She walked carefully, like someone stepping into a place where they were not fully welcome. Her eyes moved around the room, taking everything in, then quickly dropping to the floor. This was not a big stage or a fancy hall. Still, it felt huge to her. The piano alone made the space feel heavy. Its black surface reflected the lights above, and the keys looked almost too clean, too perfect. She had practiced on old keyboards before, some with broken keys, some with uneven sound. This piano felt different, felt unforgiving. The instructors watched her closely. They had seen many students before, talented ones, confident ones, and many who believed they were ready but were not. From the moment she walked in, they thought they knew where she belonged. Her posture, the way she avoided eye contact, the way she paused before each step, it all told a story they had already decided to believe. One of them leaned slightly toward another and whispered something short. A quick shake of the head followed. Another instructor sighed softly and wrote something on the paper in front of them. It was not cruel, but it was careless. They believed they were being realistic. She felt it, even without hearing their words. People like her often learned to feel judgment in the air. It came in the way people looked past you instead of at you. Came in the silence that was not kind. Her chest felt tight, and she took a slow breath, the way she always did when fear tried to take over. She had not come from a place where music was taken seriously. There were no long lessons, no expensive teachers, no quiet rooms made just for practice. Music had been something she found on her own. Something she held on to when the world felt too loud or too empty at the same time. The piano had become a place where she could speak without using words. But none of that mattered here. In this room, only what happened in the next few minutes would count. An instructor cleared their throat and gave a short signal for her to begin when ready. No smile. No encouragement. Just a simple motion of the hand. Felt like being pushed into deep water and told to swim. She walked toward the piano slowly. Each step felt louder than it should have been. The sound of her shoes against the floor echoed in her ears. She wondered if everyone could hear her heart beating the way she could. When she reached the bench, she stopped for a moment, unsure whether to sit or turn back. For just a second, she imagined leaving. She imagined apologizing, saying she was not ready, saying this was a mistake. That would have matched what everyone expected. It would have been easy, but she did not leave. She sat down. The bench felt firm beneath her, unfamiliar. She adjusted her position once, then again. Her hands hovered above her lap, unsure where to rest. The room stayed quiet, too quiet. The instructors waited, their faces calm but already decided. They had seen nervous students before. Most of them fell apart before touching a single key. They believed this would be no different. In their minds, the outcome was already written. She placed her hands on her knees and closed her eyes for a brief moment. She was not praying. She was remembering. Remembering the nights she practiced alone. Remembering the times music helped her through moments she thought she could not survive. Remembering why she loved the piano in the first place. When she opened her eyes, they landed on the keys. White and black. Simple. Honest. They did not judge her. They did not expect anything. They only waited. Still, fear clung to her. What if her hands slipped? What if her mind went blank? What if the sound came out wrong? She swallowed hard. Her fingers trembled slightly as she lifted them. From the instructor's point of view, this pause felt like proof. Proof that she was unprepared. Proof that she did not belong in this room. One of them shifted in their chair, already bored. Another glanced at the clock. She noticed the movement from the corner of her eye. It hurt more than she expected. Not because she wanted approval, but because she wanted a fair chance. Just one. Her shoulders dropped slightly as she took another breath. She reminded herself that she did not need to impress them. She only needed to be honest with the music. Her fingers moved closer to the keys. The room seemed to lean forward, though no one actually moved. Even the instructors felt it, the moment before something either breaks or holds together. They were ready for collapse. Ready for missed notes, shaky rhythm, an awkward stop. Ready to confirm what they already believed. She rested her fingers lightly on the keys but did not press yet. The silence stretched longer, felt endless. Her heart pounded so hard she wondered if it would throw her off completely. Then something inside her settled. It was small, almost invisible, but it mattered. A quiet decision. A choice to stop fighting the fear and let the music lead instead. Her fingers stopped shaking. The instructors did not notice this change. They were too focused on their own expectations. She straightened her back slightly, not with pride, but with purpose. Her hands were now ready, positioned exactly where they needed to be. The piano waited. The room held its breath, not knowing that everything was about to change, starting with just one note. And that note was closer than anyone realized. The silence did not break right away. It stayed in the room, thick and heavy, pressing down on everyone. She was still sitting at the piano, her fingers resting on the keys, not moving yet. From the outside, it looked like hesitation. From the inside, it felt like standing at the edge of something very deep. Her breathing was slow now, but her heart still raced. She could feel every beat in her chest, strong and fast, like it was reminding her that this moment mattered. She tried not to think about the instructors behind her. She tried not to imagine their faces or the notes they were writing in their minds. Still, their presence filled the room. Time felt strange. Only a few seconds had passed, but it felt much longer to her. Long enough for doubt to start creeping back in. A small voice inside her whispered that she should hurry, that waiting too long would only make things worse. Another voice told her to stop, to leave before she embarrassed herself. She pressed her lips together and focused on the piano instead. The keys were cool beneath her fingers. She noticed tiny details she had never paid attention to before. The faint sound of the room settling. The soft hum of lights above. Even the smell of polished wood and old paper. The instructors shifted again. One cleared their throat softly, not in anger, but impatience. Another leaned back in their chair, crossing their arms. To them, this delay was exactly what they expected. A sign of nerves taking control. They had already seen this story many times. Someone came in hopeful, froze under pressure, then failed quietly. They believed this was just another version of the same thing. She felt that pressure pressing against her back. It made her shoulders tense for a moment. Her fingers curled slightly, then relaxed again. She reminded herself that she had played through fear before, in rooms much smaller, in situations that felt just as scary in their own way. Her mind drifted, just for a second, to the first time she ever touched a piano. It had not been perfect. The sound had been uneven, and the keys were worn down from years of use. But she remembered how it made her feel. Calm, safe, like she had found something meant just for her. That memory steadied her. She adjusted her hands slightly, placing them more firmly on the keys. Her posture changed without her noticing. Not stiff, but grounded, as if she had finally decided to stay. Behind her, the instructors noticed the movement but did not read into it. One of them glanced at another, raising an eyebrow. Their patience was thinning. In their minds, the longer she waited, the more certain the outcome became. The audience, if there was one, was quiet. No one spoke. No one moved. It felt like everyone was waiting for the same thing, but for very different reasons. Some waited for proof of failure. She waited for courage. Her hands hovered just a fraction above the keys again. The fear had not left, but it had changed. It no longer felt like something blocking her. It felt like something she had to move through. She swallowed hard. Her thoughts became messy for a moment. What if the piano sounded different than she expected? What if the room swallowed the sound? What if the first note came out too soft or too loud? She almost laughed at herself. Music had never been about perfection for her. It had always been about honesty, about saying something true even if it was imperfect. That reminder brought a small sense of relief. One instructor leaned forward slightly, pen ready, as if preparing to write something final. Another sighed quietly, already disconnected from the moment. She felt a sudden wave of emotion rise in her chest. Not panic, but something closer to determination. A quiet refusal to be reduced to a single judgment before she had even begun. Her fingers lowered again. This time they did not pull back. The room seemed to narrow, shrinking down to just her and the piano. Everything else faded slightly. The whispers of doubt, the weight of expectation, the fear of being seen the wrong way. She focused on the sound she wanted to create. She heard it in her mind first, clear and steady. She trusted that memory more than the fear. Still she paused. That pause was not weakness. It was control. The instructors misread it completely. To them it was the final sign. One of them exchanged a look with another that said, without words, that this was about to fall apart. She inhaled slowly, then let the breath out just as carefully. Her shoulders relaxed. Her hands settled. For the first time since entering the room, she felt present. Fully there. Not thinking about what might happen after. Not imagining the reactions. Just here now. Her finger pressed slightly harder against one key, testing the weight without making sound. Felt right. The silence stretched once more, but it felt different now. Less heavy. More focused. Her heart was still beating fast, but it was steady. Strong. Instructors waited, unaware that their certainty was about to be challenged. They believed the collapse would happen any second. They believed the silence meant failure was already taking shape. She did not look back at them. She did not need to. Her eyes stayed on the keys. The moment before the first note felt fragile, like glass. Everything balanced on it. And then, without drama, without warning, she finally moved. Her finger lowered toward the key. The room did not yet know it, but the story they thought they were watching was no longer the same. The first sound was only a breath away. The first note came out softer than anyone expected, but it was clear. It did not stumble or fade. It hung in the air, gentle but steady, like it knew exactly where it belonged. The sound traveled across the room and settled into the silence that had been waiting for it. For a brief moment, no one moved. The instructors did not write anything. They did not shift in their chairs. One of them had been leaning forward, ready to mark a mistake, but their pen stopped mid-air. The sound was not loud, not dramatic, but it was honest. And it caught them off guard. She felt it too. The moment the key went down and the sound filled the room, something inside her loosened. The fear did not disappear, but it stepped back. Her shoulders dropped just a little. Her hands stayed where they were. She pressed the next key. Then another. Each note followed the last with care. There was space between them, not because she was unsure, but because she was listening. She listened to how the piano responded. She listened to the way the room carried the sound. She adjusted without thinking, guided by feeling rather than thought. The instructors exchanged quick glances. This was not what they had prepared for. They had expected missed notes, uneven timing, a shaky start. Instead, they were hearing control. Quiet control, but real. She kept playing. The melody began to form slowly, like a picture coming into focus. It was simple. No fast runs. No showy movements. Just a clear line of sound that moved forward without rushing. It felt personal, like a story being told one sentence at a time. The room changed. The silence was no longer heavy. It was attentive. People leaned in without realizing it. The piano no longer felt like an object under judgment. Felt like a voice. Her hands moved more freely now. The shaking was gone. Her fingers knew where to go, even when her mind tried to interfere. She trusted them. She had spent too many hours practicing alone not to. One instructor adjusted their posture, sitting up straighter. Another uncrossed their arms. Their expressions softened, replaced by curiosity. They were no longer waiting for failure. They were trying to understand what they were hearing. She reached a part of the piece where the sound deepened slightly. The notes carried more weight. Not louder, just fuller. Surprised even her. The piano responded warmly, as if it recognized her intention. A quiet breath escaped her lips. She was no longer thinking about the room behind her. She was inside the music now. The piano felt familiar again, like the old ones she practiced on, even though this one was polished and perfect. It no longer felt unforgiving. The instructors noticed something else too. Her timing was steady. Her touch was careful. There was a calm in her playing that could not be taught easily. Came from listening, from patience, from knowing when not to rush. One of them slowly lowered their pen onto the table. The audience, if anyone could be called that, stayed silent. No coughs. No shifting. It was the kind of silence that happens when people are afraid to break something delicate. She moved into the next section of the piece. The melody lifted slightly, then settled again. It was not sad. It was not joyful. It was honest. It carried the kind of emotion that did not ask for attention but earned it. Her breathing matched the rhythm now. In and out. Smooth. Her back stayed straight, not stiff, just balanced. Her hands rose and fell naturally. The instructors had stopped looking at their papers. All eyes were on her hands. One of them blinked slowly, as if waking from a wrong assumption. Another tilted their head, listening more closely. They had judged her before she played a single note. Now they were being forced to confront that judgment. She reached a small pause in the music. Just a breath between phrases. She did not rush through it. She let it exist. That pause spoke just as clearly as the notes. Then she continued. The sound grew slightly stronger, not louder, but more confident. The notes connected more easily now, flowing instead of stepping. The melody felt sure of itself. The room felt smaller again, but in a different way. More intimate. As if everyone had been invited into something private without asking. One instructor felt a tightness in their chest they had not expected. It was the uncomfortable feeling of realizing they had been wrong. Not just about her ability, but about the kind of musician she was. She was not trying to impress. She was trying to communicate. Her fingers moved with quiet purpose. Even when the melody shifted, even when the harmony changed, she stayed calm. There was no panic in her hands. The instructors had seen technical skill before. They had seen speed and precision. But this was different. This was restraint. This was someone who knew when less was more. She reached another turning point in the piece. The notes dipped low, then climbed gently back up. The piano's sound filled the room, warm and steady. She felt something rise in her chest. Not nerves. Gratitude. For the instrument. For the moment. For the chance she had almost walked away from. Her eyes stayed on the keys, but her face softened. There was a hint of ease there now. A quiet acceptance. Behind her, one instructor leaned closer, forgetting to stay neutral. Another gave a small nod without realizing it. The story had changed completely. What was supposed to be a collapse had turned into something solid. Something grounded. She played on, unaware of the full effect she was having. She only knew that the music felt right. That the sound matched what she had been holding inside for so long. The final notes of this section approached slowly. She did not rush them. She allowed each one to land, to fade naturally. When she finished the phrase, she did not stop abruptly. Her hands hovered for a moment, ready for what came next. The room remained silent, not because of doubt, but because everyone was listening, and they were no longer waiting for her to fail. The music moved forward with quiet strength. She did not rush and she did not pull back. Each note felt placed with care, as if she was walking across stones in a stream, steady and sure. The piano answered her touch with warmth, and the sound filled the room in a way no one expected at the start. The instructors were no longer sitting back. Without meaning to, they had leaned closer. Their faces showed focus now, not judgment. The papers on their laps had gone untouched. Pens rested against fingers that were no longer writing. Whatever plans they had made for this moment were quietly falling apart. She felt the shift before she understood it. The room felt different behind her. The weight that had pressed on her shoulders earlier was gone. In its place was something lighter. Space, tension, respect. Her hands moved smoothly from one part of the piece to the next. The melody grew richer, not louder, just deeper. Carried feeling without forcing it. There was patience in the way she played, and that patience reached the people listening. One instructor noticed the small details. The way she let notes fade naturally instead of cutting them short. The way her fingers stayed relaxed even during harder moments. These were not accidents. These were choices. Another instructor felt a quiet sense of embarrassment. They remembered the whispers, the quick judgments, the certainty of failure they had shared only minutes before. Now those thoughts felt shallow. They realized how easily experience can turn into assumption. She reached a section where the music softened again. The sound dipped, gentle and calm. Felt like a breath after a long thought. She played it with care, letting the quiet speak. The room stayed perfectly still. Even small movements felt too loud now. Someone shifted slightly in their chair, then froze, as if afraid to interrupt. The music had taken control of the space. Her face showed concentration but also peace. The fear that once tightened her expression was gone. In its place was something honest. She was not performing for approval anymore. She was sharing something real. The instructors saw it clearly now. This was not luck. This was not a surprise moment that would fall apart any second. This was skill shaped by time and feeling. She moved into the final section of the piece. The notes began to rise again, not sharply, but with purpose. The melody carried forward like a quiet promise. Her breathing stayed steady. Her shoulders stayed relaxed. Her hands flowed across the keys with confidence that did not need to be loud. One instructor felt their chest tighten again, this time with admiration. They had taught many students, but moments like this were rare. Moments where someone played not to show ability, but to communicate something deeper. Another instructor slowly nodded, not in approval, but in understanding. They were listening the way they should have listened from the beginning. She reached the final phrase. She knew it was coming. She had practiced this ending many times, alone, in rooms where no one listened. Still, this moment felt different. She slowed slightly, giving the ending space to breathe. The notes settled gently, one after another, like footsteps coming to a stop. The final note was not dramatic. It was soft, controlled, and full. She held it just long enough, then lifted her finger and let the sound fade naturally into silence. Her hands stayed above the keys for a moment. She did not move right away. She let the quiet return on its own. The silence after the music felt heavier than before, but in a different way. It was full, complete. No one spoke. The instructors looked at each other, unsure who should react first. They had prepared for disappointment, not for this kind of stillness. She finally lowered her hands to her lap. Her shoulders dropped slightly, as if she had been holding something heavy and had just set it down. She did not turn around yet. She waited. Her heart was beating fast again, but it felt different now. Not from fear, but from release. One instructor cleared their throat, then stopped. Another took a slow breath. Words felt unnecessary in that moment. She turned slightly on the bench, just enough to face the room. Her expression was calm, open, and tired in a gentle way. She had given everything she needed to give. The instructors met her eyes now. Really met them. Not as someone they expected to fail, but as someone who had earned their attention. One of them stood up slowly. The movement felt careful, respectful. Another followed, then another. There was no loud reaction. No sudden applause. Just quiet acknowledgement. She stood as well, unsure of what came next. Her hands rested at her sides. She felt exposed, but not weak. An instructor spoke softly, choosing words with care. They thanked her. Simply. Honestly. The room exhaled. She nodded, not knowing what else to do. A small smile touched her face, then faded again. She was still processing what had just happened. The instructors began to speak among themselves, but now their voices were different. Curious, respectful, thoughtful. She listened quietly, standing near the piano that no longer felt intimidating. It felt familiar now, like an old friend she had just reunited with. What had started as doubt had turned into something else entirely. The collapse they anticipated never came. Instead, something stronger had taken its place. And everyone in the room knew that this moment would stay with them long after the chairs were empty and the piano lid was closed. The room stayed quiet for a moment longer, as if everyone needed time to catch up with what had just happened. She stood near the piano, hands relaxed at her sides, breathing slowly. The sound of the last note still felt present, even though it had faded away. An instructor finally spoke again, this time with warmth. They asked her a simple question about the piece. Not to test her, but to understand her. She answered softly, choosing her words carefully. Her voice was calm now, steady in a way it had not been earlier. As she spoke, the tension that once filled the room continued to dissolve. The instructors listened closely, nodding, asking gentle follow-up questions. The conversation felt human, equal. Gone were the sharp edges of judgment. She explained how music had been her quiet place for a long time, how she learned by listening, by repeating, by feeling her way through mistakes instead of fearing them. She did not try to make it sound impressive. She just told the truth. One instructor admitted, without excuse, that they had expected something very different when she first walked in. The words were honest, not defensive. Another added that the first note had changed everything. She absorbed that slowly, not with pride, but with understanding. She knew what it felt like to be judged before being known. They asked her to sit again and play a small section one more time, not because they doubted her, but because they wanted to listen again. She agreed. This time, when she sat at the piano, there was no fear, only focus. Her fingers found the keys easily. The sound flowed without effort, felt lighter now, freer. The room listened, but it no longer felt like a test, felt like a shared moment. When she finished, one instructor smiled openly. Another quietly clapped, then stopped, unsure if applause was right. It did not matter. The message had already landed. They spoke about possibilities, about guidance, about growth. Not promises, but honest interest. She listened, grateful, grounded. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future shaped by music. Not just as something private, but as something shared. When it was time to leave, she stood near the door again, the same place where she had started. But she was not the same person now. An instructor thanked her once more, this time looking directly at her, not past her. Another wished her well. The words were simple, but they mattered. She stepped outside into the air, which felt fresher than before. The world sounded different, sharper, clearer. She walked slowly, replaying the moment in her mind. Not the fear, but the courage it took to stay. The way the first note changed everything. She knew there would still be doubt ahead. There always was. But now she had proof. Not for others, but for herself. That proof stayed with her in quiet moments. In practice. In silence. In sound. Back in the room, the instructors remained seated for a while after she left. They spoke quietly about what they had witnessed. About how close they had come to missing it. One of them folded their papers and set them aside. Another stared at the piano, thoughtful. They talked about how easy it is to mistake nerves for weakness. How experience can sometimes make people forget to listen. The piano sat silently at the front of the room, unchanged, yet somehow different. It had spoken through her, and it had been heard. As the lights dimmed and the chairs emptied, the moment lingered. Not as a dramatic story, but as a reminder. A reminder that ability does not always announce itself loudly. That talent can arrive quietly. That one honest note can silence every wrong assumption. She went home that day and practiced again, just like always. Same careful touch. Same steady breathing. But now there was something new beneath it all. Belief. Not the loud kind. The quiet kind that stays. The kind that waits patiently for the next note.